Earlier this year, the Philippines and the United States conducted their largest ever joint war games. We saw the Balikatan exercises fielding more than 17,000 troops, not only from the Philippines and the United States, but also from a lot of allied and partnered nations. We had observers from Australia, from Japan, the United Kingdom, and the message was quite clear that the Philippines and United States are taking their bilateral relationship to new heights and new levels. It's not just the size of the Balikatan exercises which is an important thing to keep in mind. 17,600 troops is more than twice what we had in previous years. But it's also the nature of military exercises between the Philippines, the United States, and other allied nations who were there as observers. For instance, the two allies actually simulated the sinking of a vessel of an adversary country. Of course, they didn't mention that it's China, but everyone knows that given the location of the exercises, the location of the war games, this had a lot to do with the disputes in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. The two sides also deployed state-of-the-art weapon systems, including the Patriot missile systems that the United States has been using or fielding in order to deal with adversaries across the world. So both in terms of size and nature of exercises, this was truly historic. But the question is, what is the implication of this for US-Philippine relationship? In fact, the bigger question is, what is the implication of the largest ever Balikatan exercises in recent memory for the Philippine-US-China triangular relationship? Is this provocative? Is this for deterrence? Does this have to do with the West Philippine Sea and South China Sea disputes? Or is this also about Taiwan? That's what we're going to find out in our interview today with the Executive Director for Balikatan Exercises, Colonel Mike Logico. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself first, Colonel? To a lot of us, you're well known, especially those people who are in media or write a lot about the Philippines. What's going on? How did you end up in your current executive agent position?
I'd like to ask that myself.
Right.
I'm a colonel in the Philippine Army.
Philippine Army.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, just to get the uniform.
My current position right now, on my day job, I'm the director of the Joint and Combined Training Center.
Which does what specifically for?
I train my center trains units, particularly the Unified Commands and the Joint Task Forces,
right,
to get them to that level of proficiency on joint operations.
Right.
So what's a joint operation?
Exactly,
yeah. It's a military operation where you have more than one service component involved. So if you have the Army operating together with the Air Force, then that's a joint operation. If you have the Air Force operating with the Navy, that's a joint operation.
So multi-domain.
Yes.
That's the other term. I can't hear about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the progression of an officer's career, they first have to be proficient in their single component operations. Like if you go from lieutenant to captain to major, you have to be proficient in if you're in the Army, you have to be proficient in ground operations. So they make use of a lot of combined arms operations, the infantry with the cavalry, the armor, and the artillery. The same is true when it comes to the Navy and the Air Force. So when officers progress beyond the rank of lieutenant colonel, carrying over to the rank of colonel, they have to be proficient in joint operations. They have to work well with the other service components. See. So my job is to train people and to train units on jointness, on the doctrine of jointness.
Right.
We have to be proficient in working together. Part of my job is also to conduct exercises. So it's not just lectures, it's practical exercises, field training exercises. They come in many forms. Sometimes we do tabletop exercises, staff exercises involving the staff of commanders.
Right.
And we also do command post exercises. We simulate a major operation without the troops. At the very end of the extreme, we do field training exercises. So it's not just the planning, but also in the execution. And that's where Balikatan comes in.
Right.
This is probably the most complicated of all exercises.
And the most high profile, right? I mean,
well, yes.
can you tell us a little bit about the history of Balikatan? When did this start? What was the nature? What was the purpose behind Balikatan, and how it has evolved over time? Not only during the 4 or 5 years that you have been directly involved with it, but based on your understanding of the arc of the exercises.
Okay,
ano
so...
ambag nito? I mean, ano ambag na exercises
okay.
na yan? Yeah.
So, Balikatan is one of the lines of effort of the Mutual Defense Board and the Security of Engagement Board. Ano? The objective here of Balikatan is to is to demonstrate interoperability between the AFP and its partner ally, which is the United States.
So this is mega coordination. So
Yes,
if you're
absolutely.
teaching between different branches of the Philippine Armed Forces, this is between armed forces of multiple countries.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
So the complication
Next
is
level,
magnified because you're not only doing it among the three services, you'll also have to do it with a partner ally. So that is the objective of Balikatan, to get us to that level of proficiency where we can operate together with the other service components, and we can also operate together with a treaty ally. Which is the reason why when you say Balikatan, it's almost always tied in with the Mutual Defense Treaty. Because the Mutual Defense Treaty is that instrument that enables us to tells us practically that we have to train together if you're expecting to fight together.
And when was the first Balikatan, and why is it so big? Why are Balikatan exercises generally big? We'll talk about later on why this year is super big, but last year was what, 8,700, 900?
Yes.
So usually it's around 6, 7, 8,000, right? That's a lot of people. Why is Balikatan the mother of all exercises? At least this is what it appears outside.
In this particular Balikatan, we're calling it the Super Bowl of exercises.
So one way of putting it.
Especially if the Americans describe it. They describe it in their terms, so they call it the Super Bowl of exercises. Once upon a time, we used to have US bases.
Right. Until 1992, essentially.
And then after that, even during the time that we had US bases, we also had training together. No? And
was there something as big as Balikatan during the Cold War?
Not so much, you know. But since sometime it was 1991, where it's a combination of factors.
Of course,
And then also to add to that, you also had the Mount Pinatubo eruption.
Right.
It
End of
sort
Cold
of
War.
it sort of hastened up the removal of the US bases. But you still had the Mutual Defense Treaty.
Right.
Okay, so the natural offshoot of that is in the absence of those of their actual presence, we have to train together to get us to that level of proficiency, to that level of confidence that we can actually execute an operation together. Now, through the years, we've gone from tactical level exercises at the level of the squad, individuals, soldiers' individual skills, and then we build that up to larger formations from squad to company, battalion, and practically what you're looking at now is probably the most ambitious of all exercises, because now we're practically involving a lot of units from the different unified commands. So now we have exercises that are happening in the Visayas. We have exercises that are happening in Palawan and also in the island of Luzon. So this is...
So hindi lang multi-domain, multi-theater in a sense,
Yes.
right? And multi-topography, very different kind of topography,
Yes.
different kind of operations.
Yes, and we're doing it in the we're also including cyber defense.
Right.
So we're already recognizing the cyber domain
Right.
as one of the areas that we have to focus on. Most of our command and control systems, to include intelligence, surveillance, those things fall under the cyber domain. And the vulnerabilities that exist in the civilian cyber domain also bleeds over to our capabilities as well. So we have to we cannot ignore that The cyber domain is one of the areas where military interest needs to focus on.
Colonel, before again going to the latest Balikatan, the reason I'm asking about the background and all is because I want people to appreciate what's going on here. I want people to appreciate that there's a conscious, concerted, systematic effort by the Armed Forces of the Philippines not only to work more effectively with our allies, especially US, but also to modernize itself, to be more capable in waging or conducting modern warfare.
Yes.
What is your understanding over time? Is the Philippines moving in the right direction? The reason I'm asking this, Colonel, is because I see a lot of layman, nonsense out there. Like this idea is, AFP, ano lang yan, hindi yan ready for 21st century. AFP, wala tayong nakuha sa mga Amerikano after all of those years. I know the reality is far more complicated than that, and I would say even more optimistic and encouraging than that. What do you say to a lot of people outside there who don't seem to appreciate all the efforts you guys are putting in, all the improvements you have been undergoing?
My simple answer to that is, if you were tasked to defend the country, to put your life on the line, to defend the nation, wouldn't you take every advantage available to you?
Right.
Wouldn't you use every advantage available to you for you to execute your mandate? And if the answer is yes, then you have to train with the treaty ally. Because it would be stupid not to. Okay? I compare this type of exercise to that of an athlete who wants to train to be a world-class athlete.
To
okay,
qualify for Olympics.
Yes, let's pick a sport. Okay,
right.
It is possible for you to train alone. Like if you want to swim,
right.
you can learn how to swim all by yourself. All you have to do is just buy the best books in swimming, watch the best videos on swimming.
YouTube, yeah.
And you're probably going to learn how to swim. Yeah, but chances are you're not going to be a world-class swimmer. Unless you have to train with a world-class coach, unless you train with a world-class partner.
Right.
Okay? Because why? Well, you need somebody to pace you. You need somebody to motivate you. You need someone to point out your bad habits. Only then you could break that glass ceiling and create a benchmark of what you want to become.
The gold standard.
Yes, precisely.
Right.
I mean, look, even the best athletes, Manny Pacquiao had to get a world-class coach.
Right.
He had to get a world-class sparring partner, right? To get to where he is right now.
But Colonel, what about those who say that, well, okay, in theory it makes sense, but there's also the threat of dependency. I mean, you can always get the best coach, etc. But if you're not making the most out of that, you end up as just being independent on the best coach or best partner. What do you say about people who are saying that all of this exercise we have with the US?
I think we have too much pride. We have too much pride to be overly dependent.
Right.
A lot of our soldiers, the way they carry themselves, and this is what I always remind them,
Please
tell them that when we train together with the Americans, keep in mind, you're not worse or better than them. See yourself as equals. You have to see yourselves as their equals. We are just as good as they are, and sometimes we may even be better at certain respects. Remember, we fought side by side. World War II.
Right.
We've distinguished ourselves in the Korean War. And we have years of combat experience. Isn't that something that we should, well, I'm not saying that we should be proud of it, but isn't that something?
Obviously, there are concerns that the Armed Forces of the Philippines for a very long time was focused on domestic insurgency. There are concerns about bureaucratic corruption, all of the problems we have had in the past. But in fairness, since 2011, with the revised AFP modernization, it looks like we are moving towards becoming much more modern 21st century armed forces. What is your understanding of what we're getting right and where we can still do better in terms of the AFP modernization for the 21st century? Because of course, President Ramos really was the first one who pushed for this back in the 1990s.
I'm an army guy,
right?
I'm an army guy. So, siyempre, the if I just think about the army,
right?
Yeah, modernization, since the bulk of the AFP
budget
are colored green.
Yeah,
we have to modernize the army. What we're getting right now is we're focusing also on the Navy and the Air Force.
Yeah.
Recognizing the fact that in a modern defense force, you have to have a robust joint force, and you cannot achieve that unless you have a very strong Navy and a strong Air Force.
And we're an archipelagic country,
especially
that. Baselines are as big as Russia's almost,
especially that. We are an archipelagic country.
Yeah.
Our borders are not land borders; they're maritime borders. To protect that, you need a navy. You need a navy to protect that. What we're getting right is that we are now focusing on modernizing our navy and our air force. You see, even though I'm in the army, I consider myself service agnostic.
Right.
Yeah, I
whichever works best for the country.
Precisely.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is we're trying to change the culture of the AFP. Instead of seeing ourselves as, I'm Army, I'm Navy, I'm Air Force. Now we
tribal.
We have to see ourselves as a defense force.
Are we moving the right? I don't want to put you on the spot, but tayo mga Filipino, no? I mean, we come from the north. There's this idea of, what I'm saying. It's just part of our political culture, right? I don't think this is an AFP thing. It's a very Filipino thing.
I'm trying to change the culture.
Exactly.
Actually, we are trying to change the culture. When we train our students in the Command and General Staff College, we like to encourage them. When we come together, let's not call ourselves Army, Navy, Air Force.
Right.
Okay. Let's call ourselves the land, the ground, the maritime, and the air components. Components. Ground component, air component, maritime component. The word component is essential because if you start using it in planning conversations, the term component already signifies that I'm part of a larger effort. You see, I don't provide all the capabilities of the effort, but I provide crucial capabilities of the effort. And I need to rely on the maritime and the air component as well. You see, you start with that, and then you develop a culture for planning.
Right. So it's not just getting the best weapons for Navy and Air Force. It's also about reorienting the mindset of everyone, including the Army, especially the dominant Army.
And it also involves mutual respect between officers belonging to the different service components. I have to look at my brother Navy officer, and I have to respect his expertise, and I have to respect him as a professional. It starts from there, and then once we get the habit of looking at ourselves as professional warfighters, then we develop a culture.
Although, of course, healthy rivalry will always be there. I mean, for some of us who watch Top Gun, like even within Air Force, there's going to be rivalry, etc.
Rivalry to an extent, if it drives you to do better, that's good. That's a healthy rivalry, But not to make it a toxic rivalry, but in a way where we can help each other achieve better.
Right, not parochial, tribalistic mindset, etc.
Yes.
But before talking more about Navy and all, and modernization of the Philippines, which brings us to the latest Balikatan exercises, what were the lessons we learned from Marawi? Because generally, let's say when it comes to jungle warfare, etc., AFP is especially Army is very proficient. But it looks like in the urban warfare context, there was some adjustments that had to be made, right? I mean, what is your understanding of the tactical strategic lessons from the 2017 months-long siege in Marawi? I hope this is not a bolt from the blue question, but it just came up to me because you're talking about how the improvements, operational evolutions that we're making. Did we learn the right lessons from that? Do you think the Marawi crisis made the AFP much more modern, much more agile, much more nimble?
Well, maybe the safe answer there.
I know you're in charge of Balikatan, but I'm sorry, I'm going to take advantage of you and ask about
maybe
that.
The safe answer there is we learn more from our mistakes than our successes. Yeah. A lot of times when we make mistakes, we spend the remainder of the day figuring out why we made this mistake.
Right, right.
Okay. When you're successful, it's very unlikely that you're going to spend a moment of reflection on why you were successful. Most likely, just pat yourself on the back and say, "Whoa, I did good."
Right.
And then nothing anymore. So we learn a lot from mistakes, and this is what we also want to teach our people. In exercises, you can make all the mistakes you want because the risk is very low. It's an exercise. Right? Okay. So you make the mistake in an exercise, you learn from that so that you don't make that same mistake when it comes to real world operations. See? So I think probably to answer from Marawi, I think we should learn more from the mistakes of Marawi than from its successes.
Now let's go now to the meat of discussion. This year's Balikatan is turning out even bigger than earlier expectations. We were looking at going from 8,000 to 15,000, then 16,000. Now it looks like 7,000 and counting. What's going on there? Because we also got to know the other month that Australia is also sending its biggest contingent. So this is not only Philippines and US, but we know since mid-2010s, Australians were coming in. The Japanese in 2018, for the first time, I think they had deployment of a armored unit since the end of Second World War. What's going on here? Why is it so big? Why is it so important? What's the fuzz? Why are so many people involved in this?
Well, you have to understand that of those 17,000, not all of them are boots on the ground.
Yeah, staff, support, logistics.
Many of them, yes, they are
servicemen.
They serve as exercise support.
Right.
And because there's so many moving parts, the combat support and combat service support are there to support whatever people who are doing the exercises. Many of them are in their ships, are in their Navy ships. So many of them don't get their boots on the ground. They're over there in the littoral areas. They are steaming, doing maritime maneuvers. Okay, it's big because we are progressing. We are exercising certain concepts that we have not exercised before. So what we're doing right now is we're doing a littoral live fire exercise. Why are we exercising in the littorals? In previous Balikatan exercises, we've been doing that inside a military camp, like in Crow Valley, Fort Magsaysay. Okay, those are landlocked areas. And you won't get Navy ships into those landlocked areas, right? So it sort of limits also the participation of the Navy. So we need to train all of them together. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force. But where do you train them? You have to go to the
So you change the topography so that you can more effectively do multi-domain.
Precisely. Because that's the only way. There are other ways to train them. You could train the Army and the Air Force, or you can train the Air Force and the Navy. You see, but there's always that's something lacking. You cannot actually say, okay, we could say that we are proficient as a joint force unless you get to train together. You see, it's not just a matter of firing the trigger. It's also a question of communicating to one another.
Coordination is everything. I mean, we see that now. That's the problem of Russia, right? Invading Ukraine.
Yes, precisely.
They had huge problems with multi-domain coordination.
Yes, precisely. So the opportunity to do it is really at the littoral areas. So that's why we're pushing to the beaches. Okay. But we're only exercising within our territorial waters. Okay. So it's within 12 nautical miles.
Now, speaking of Balikatan, initially we heard the location is going to be a little bit to the north, and then it was kind of like adjusted to Zambales. What's going on there? Because some people are saying maybe we have to just make sure it's not too provocative, and that maybe let's not get more involved with Taiwan. Let's focus more on West Philippine Sea. What are we looking at here?
Not exactly. We did a survey of several locations. We did a survey of several locations. Ilocos was one of them. Okay. But after looking at Ilocos, we found out that there are certain logistical challenges in getting there that we still have to figure out pa.
Like fishermen being, like
No, not
being
necessarily,
displaced,
because it was it's going to be a 2-day activity anyway. But there are certain logistical challenges that we need to solve first.
Yeah.
So we are experimenting on it in a controlled littoral area in Zambales. Okay.
Where many Balikatan happened in the past, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
we are when we get those little quirks ironed out, then we can explore other areas.
So you're saying in the future it's possible it will be in somewhere like Ilocos? Is that something that...
That's a very strong possibility. That's a very strong possibility.
Interesting.
Yeah, but in the meantime, we focus first on a certain area that we can control.
All right. So it was making sure that, nothing goes haywire, right? It's making sure planchado lahat, in short.
Yes.
So it's really logistical consideration rather than political or strategic. Each Balikatan is special in its own way, but this Balikatan seems to be very special because a lot of unprecedented things are happening. I mean, first of all, of course, it comes against the backdrop of the situation in Ukraine, where I think a lot of lessons are being learned. If I'm not mistaken, the Philippine Army had also one of its biggest exercises with its American counterparts earlier this year. Exactly,
yes.
Earlier this year. And from my understanding is that, openly, you have officials saying that we are trying to apply lessons we're learning from what happened in Ukraine in fighting modern warfare. And for me, it makes perfect sense because some of our potential adversaries in this region have a very similar, hardware and potentially software to Russia, right? And I think Ukraine, as being a relatively small country but performing so well, maybe there are lessons for here. Now, speaking of Balikatan, I think for the first time we're going to use Patriot missile systems or something like that. Can you tell us more about what's up with this Patriot missile systems deployment? Why is it so big? We're also having simulation of a sinking of a vessel. We are also having HIMARS, among others. Can we go one by one to these ones? Because the problem is, I think, in media, these things are just mentioned, they're big, they're special, but the explanation is always not there. And that's why I felt you're the perfect person to ask about it. Colonel, can you explain to us, to our audience, why is it important that we have deployment of some of these assets? In general, what are the first things with Balikatan, aside from its size, right? And each of this hardware, what is the implication of that, strategically, tactically, among others?
Well, the Patriots and the HIMARS, these are weapon systems that the United States Armed Forces are going to use anyway, whatever conflict.
Right.
So Balikatan serves not only our training objectives, but also their training objectives as well. So when we bring out our artillery, because that's what we have, we train with that, they are also going to bring out their artillery for them to train on. So they normally fight with these weapon systems. They have to train with these weapon systems as well. Okay, and we're trying to see if is this weapon system compatible with this? Are there overlaps in these different weapon systems? And another thing, it also gives us an eye opener on what other types of weapon systems that we may be interested in the future,
that
we may want to acquire, because we will see that these are the capabilities of these weapon systems that they're bringing in.
So we used also Black Hawk helicopters the other year, right?
Yes, I was just in a Black Hawk helicopter an hour ago.
So I'm sure there was a time when we were just looking at it being used by Americans and wondering, can we have one of them? And then now we have one of them ourselves, right? More than one of them.
More than one.
More than one, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So maybe same thing could happen, right? With some of the other American weapon systems. We test drived it, and down the road,
down the road, we might be interested in procuring it.
Right, some of this. Does it make sense for the Philippines to have HIMARS? Or because I know Harpoon missile systems have been in consideration for the Philippines, right? I mean, there was a package approved by Pentagon, I think 2 years ago, at $2.4 billion. Harpoon missiles were mentioned, but I never heard HIMARS or Patriot missiles or things like that. Are things evolving, like in light of Ukraine?
This is my point that I was trying to make a while ago. Kasi if you are too focused on counterinsurgency, on internal security operations, your ambition for modernizing your AFP will just be limited.
Correct.
Because you're limited also to the threat that you're facing right now. You're facing an unconventional enemy. You're not even talking about armies.
Right.
You're
This
talking
is
about
something else.
yes,
yeah.
you're talking about guerrilla fighters, really. Which your answer to that would probably not be HIMARS.
Ah,
Okay?
right.
Your answer to that would probably be more on
Javelin?
whole of government approach,
Right,
whole of
right.
nation approach.
Right.
You see, but as you are going to progress from a
Tactical
capability
insurgency,
at the tactical level, and you want
Yeah.
to progress to a certain infocentric warfare type of the
Right.
defense force, then you have to have certain weapon systems in your arsenal already.
Right.
Okay, so that's why we're allowing
Yeah.
or we are encouraging those types of weapons, so that actually it will also be an eye opener for our leaders.
I mean, we have BrahMos already, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
maybe we're gonna use them. And I know BrahMos
we have
has Russian derivative technology, which is interesting.
Okay, I will not go. I will
Right.
not go there.
Yeah.
But that's we have those types of weapon systems that
Which are
we did not
advanced.
have before.
Exactly.
Okay, so that I consider that a capability upgrade. It's a
Right.
capability that we have now that we did not have before. So we're
Exactly.
filling in a certain capability gap
Right.
by getting it.
Is the AFP feeling more confident now when they're training with our major power counterparts, etc., because of the AFP
Well, that's the
modernization?
idea.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
The idea of Balikatan is not to make the AFP drool over stuff that we
Right.
don't have, because we
Right.
also have stuff that we do have.
Right.
Okay, it's an
And
opportunity.
we don't have to have all of the stuff that they have.
Yes.
It has to be tweaked to our needs.
Yes,
Exactly.
I mean
yeah.
we have to be happy. Well, we're happy with what we have. We trade with what we have.
Right.
Okay, and then we try to prove
Right.
that we can be just as proficient in joint
Right.
operations as our counterparts.
I mean, speaking of that, I remember a few years ago, remember the ASEAN China exercises and all, and there was an exercise between ASEAN and China, and like I think Filipino troops topped everyone else in terms of electronic warfare training, etc. And that was like an eye opener for everyone. Like, wow, Filipinos are actually at the cutting edge, right? Which goes against stereotypes of
Yeah,
the film.
my-
I remember this is like 2018, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. That impressed me a lot. Maybe we can check on that later on.
Would you seem to recall?
Yeah, but Colonel, going back to this, there's also going to be of course, this year Balikatan also included simulation of a sinking of a vessel. This is in Zambales,
Yes.
not too far from Scarborough Shoal, like far enough, but not too far, right? What's going on there?
I'm pretty sure
It's close enough,
No, I'm pretty sure it's far from Scarborough Shoal.
right? To end our conversation, there's a lot we can discuss, and hopefully we can come back and discuss this further down the road. But are there myths and misunderstanding, and let's just call it nonsense, a lot of nonsense out there that you want to correct? What are the biggest things that really rile you up, gets you worked up in terms of, let's say, amateur commentary on the state of AFP or the kind of exercises we're doing? We kind of gave you an idea a while ago, this idea that masyado tayong dependent sa America. We're just the little brother of America. What are these myths that really rile you up and you want to correct?
Well, getting to the point that you were trying to make, I think we have too much pride to be anyone's little brother. We also have something to prove. And what I tell our people is that remember who you are. You're a Filipino soldier. And you take pride in the fact that your mettle has already been tested several times in the past. So when you face your treaty partners, your American counterparts, never consider yourself as inferior. You are their equal, and in certain respects, you may even be better. And actually, a lot of our American counterparts, they leave the exercise with that impression that we are among the best in the world.
Right. What about the idea that, thank you for the clarification, what about the idea that Balikatan, 17,000, simulating sinking a vessel, all of this high-tech stuff coming from America, this is too provocative. We're asking for trouble. What do you say about those kind of critics? Is this about provocation?
I will say that the military is an instrument of national policy. We are doing this because the job of the military is to defend the nation. One of the unspoken or the attendant tasks on that is we have to train
Right.
to defend the nation. So, magkadugtong yan eh.
Correct.
Those two have to go together eh. I mean, if you are ordered to risk your life to defend the country, you will have to use whatever advantage you have at your disposal. And naturally, you'll have to train. Okay? The tacit agreement between a government, the civilian authority, and the armed forces is that civilian authority relies on us to come up with a military option. And we have to come up with a military option. Otherwise, we lose sense of what makes the armed forces the armed forces. So naturally, we have to train. We have to get ourselves to that level of competence, level of proficiency for us to execute our mandate.
Colonel, you mentioned a very important term that I believe is not as much appreciated by a lot of critics of what's happening right
Yeah.
now. Deterrence. I think this is a most important concept to keep in mind. How much is deterrence shaping what we're doing right now with our partners? Balikatan, how much of this is less about provocation but deterrence of potential shenanigans by some more hostile actors in this part of the world?
Yeah, deterrence is discouraging an adversary from acting. Discouraging.
Right.
Okay,
You
it's-
raise the costs
Yes.
to make them think twice before
Yes.
doing something funny.
you're short of any kinetic action.
Right.
You're actually sending a message. It's a way of communicating between actors, right? If you look at the animal kingdom, some animals have developed
Right.
through genetics certain
Evolutionary biology.
Yes,
yeah.
certain deterrents.
Right.
You have, but these are things that recognizing that you do not have to actually have to fight to win, but you have to send the message that when we need to, we will have to fight. You see, and that alone is a very strong deterrent message that that we can send. Which is entirely different from provocation, because provocation is you're taunting an adversary to take action.
Right.
But what are we doing right now? We're training inside our territorial
Right.
waters. We're training inside our territorial airspace.
Right.
See? And it is every nation, big or small, has that absolute inalienable right to defend
Right.
its territory. And that's our job.
And to remind the rest of the world that they're willing to defend their territory, just in
precisely.
case some people have second thoughts about
Yes,
that.
precisely.
right?
That's our
Yeah.
job. I would
Right.
like to quote from Miyamoto Musashi.
Right.
He said that
The samurai wisdom, right?
Yes, he said that the only reason a warrior exists
Yeah.
is to fight, and the only reason a warrior fights is to win. Otherwise, why be a warrior? There's absolutely no reason to be a warrior if your objective is not to fight,
Right.
or your objective is not to win. It's easier to count beads.
Right.
Now, who counts beads? Monks, right? And we do not train to count beads. We're not trained to be We're not trained to be diplomats.
Right.
We train you people to become warriors.
But you have been very diplomatic today in answering my questions. Just to end on this point, Colonel, I keep on thinking, because you say very important points. I just, what has been your experience in the past few years? I mean, you've been involved with Balikatan since at least 2021, right? So we had transition between
Actually, since 2017.
2017, but more directly even since 2021. What are the things you notice in this transition? Because we had two different administrations, right? How much continuity and stability is there in the foundation of the Philippine alliance with the United States, from your experience, despite all the political brouhaha?
Okay, I'm not supposed to talk about policy.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
from the operational standpoint, what is your understanding of the continuities that we're seeing? Because many would say, almost regardless of who has been the president of the Philippines, almost regardless of politics, the foundation are so strong in this alliance that they withstand that, and there has been a steady growth. Because many say
Yeah.
there's too much misunderstanding of the Philippines military-to-military relationship with the U.S., which seems to be almost immune from the politics.
Yes, this is where a professional armed forces will have to be very important.
Right.
A professional armed forces will know its duty, will know its mandate, regardless of
Constitutional mandate.
Yes, constitutional mandate, regardless of political color.
Exactly.
Okay, so when we train our people, we remind them, okay, that we are one of the instruments of national power. You have the diplomatic, informational, economic, and military.
Right.
We represent the military instrument of national power. We are here to provide civilian authority with a military option, regardless if civilian authority decides to use that option or not. See, if they decide to go with other instruments of national policy, that is totally within their prerogative.
Yeah.
But the important thing is we provide that. We provide them that option. We provide them that option because, one, who else will come up with that option?
Correct.
Yeah, the professional soldier will have to come up with that option, which the civilian authority may consider or may not consider.
Right. Okay. But you have to do your part.
We have to do our part.
You have to do your part. Yep.
Otherwise, I go back to Miyamoto Musashi. Magbibilang na lang ako ng beads.
Right.
If I cannot even provide that option to them.
What do you want to see with AFP modernization? What are the things you look forward to in the coming years or so? I mean, we're already in the third phase of the three horizon of AFP modernization. I mean, I know your army, but I know a lot of focus will be on Air Force, Navy. But one of the things you mentioned also a while ago is greater focus on cyber security capabilities. And my sense is if you look at our adversaries nowadays for countries like Philippines or US, a lot of them are very proficient in cybersecurity or rogue actors like North Korea, etc. What are those things that you believe we should look forward to in terms of development of AFP capabilities and AFP modernization?
Yes, well, one of my professors in MNSA asked us, what can we do, to stand up for ourselves,
right?
To resist foreign intervention.
Right.
I answered her, ma'am, the first thing we need to do is to change our attitudes. We have to purge a defeatist mindset. I think that's the first thing we have to do. You go into conflict, and if you think you're going to lose, you will. You see? So we have to force ourselves to, or we have to purge that defeatist mindset. So when we focus on our training our leaders, our future leaders in the AFP, you have to come up with a course of action.
Right.
Force yourself to come up with a course of action, and you'd surprise yourself. And you don't have to look very far. I mean, take a look at Ukraine.
Right.
They're facing incredible odds against their
the
favor.
largest army on earth by some counts.
Yeah. But they have stood up to their adversary, and they have distinguished themselves with much aplomb.
Correct.
Right. So you'd surprise yourself actually.
Correct.
So it begins with that. We have to.
The right mindset.
We have to develop leaders who are optimists, who can look at any situation and then figuring out what's the problem, and then develop their operational approach, like a professional would, Instead of taking a look at the situation and then immediately give up. That's what we're trying to purge, because that type of mindset is like a cancer in any armed forces. And we stop them when we extract them when we can.
The defeatist, fatalistic kind of mindset.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter. Now, if you have a professional army with that type of mindset, well, all you need to do is equip them, and we would rise to that. We would rise to the occasion.
On that note, thank you very much, Colonel Mike Loico. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. So again, Colonel Mike Loico, Executive Agent of Balikatan Exercises for 2023. I'm sure we're going to have more conversations soon. Thank you so much for being open to a lot of questions. I'm sure there's certain questions that you're more comfortable than others, but I really appreciate it. Catch us again next week on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. I am Richard Heydarian, and that is The View from Manila. We are One News, all sides, all the time.